Hello and welcome back to another video from the Mike Live in 5 channel. Today we're going to be going over the 5-3 victory against Wolves before we go into the international break. Obviously the best way to go into that international break. Coming off the back of that West Ham game, slightly disappointing to be only taking a point from that game considering how well we played against Palace at home and Southampton at home, and even the performance against Spurs in the second half, and obviously the big performance against Manchester City when we went up to the Etihad. So it was one where I came into it and I was thinking, I was watching the Wolves games back that I did for my preview, and I was thinking, Wolves have had the hardest start in the Premier League this season. And in all of the games that they've played, they've never been blown away, demolished, anything like that, especially like the first half against Villa, even the game against Liverpool to an extent. They were always in that game, and I mentioned it in my preview. I was worried about certain players and how quick they were in transitions. But I just had no idea. I don't think Gary O'Neill had any idea how badly his side were going to play against us. And obviously we were excellent as well with the fast starts and the way we utilised our set pieces. But some of Wolves' defending was just criminal. And some of their top players, I think, had off days. I think Cunha, as I said in the preview, was going to be a threat. He ended up scoring, and he was probably their most threatening player throughout the game. But I feel like players like Andre was really poor, Lamina was really poor, Bellegarde didn't even play, and I think he's one of their better players, but when he came on he didn't do great. Craig Dawson, Bueno at the back, Gomez, they just all had off days, and obviously that's down to Thomas Frank and the way we stifled them and how aggressive we were and how different our performance against West Ham in the second half was to the game against Wolves at the weekend. But I was just surprised. I was just surprised about how easy it was for us to kind of blow Wolves away. And although they scored 3 goals, I'm certain Thomas Frank will be so annoyed at the fact that 5-3 doesn't look as convincing a scoreline as 5-2 would have looked or 5-1 would have looked, because it was not a 5-3 game. In truth, we could have had about 8, and the only 2 real chances Wolves had was Aït-Nouri's third and their first goal. I mean, the second one, I think we're going to go through it, but for me, it's just a fantastic finish. But we're going to go through some of the stats. I've got the lineups, so we're going to look at some of the heat maps and obviously go through some of the pictures of the game as well. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel. I posted the last one on the Eden Road podcast account, but from this day forward, every single match review like this, match preview for the next one, is going to be on the Mike Live in 5 channel. So please, if you haven't already, go and subscribe to that. Drop a comment down below, like this video, and also whilst you're at it, go check out the full podcast that has just landed on the Eden Road podcast account. Good 35-minute chat with Miranda making her debut, Craig and Dan. We had a good chinwag about the performance of Mikkel Damsgaard, which we're going to do in this video. Nathan Collins, Ethan Pinnock. It was just a great day, a great podcast to record. When Brentford win, I really do like doing that podcast in comparison to when we get a drab 1-1 draw at home against West Ham. It's really different. So do go and check that out. But for now, let's just get straight into this video. So this is where we're going to start. We're a minute in. I know Thomas Frank's made a lot in his press conferences about, us practicing coin tosses and stuff like that. He said that a few times, but we're a minute in, so we're already past the record. We wouldn't be the first team to score in 4 consecutive matches in the first minute. But even still, Wolves had the kickoff, and look at the amount of players that we've got in Wolves' half here. Nathan Collins picks up the ball, and it's a directive. It obviously is a directive from Thomas Frank and the coaching staff that we need to overload these areas in the first few minutes. And maybe because it was past the first minute, Wolves kind of took their foot off the gas, or they weren't really concentrating. But just the way Nathan Collins drifts in between these slides gives it out to Mbumo. Damsgaard continues his run, doesn't get picked up. And this is just really sloppy defending from Wolves, especially considering the fast starts that we've literally become renowned for making in the Premier League this season. Just players not tracking their runners. It's so easy for Damsgaard to get to the byline here, and he picks out a perfect pass for Nathan Collins, who's there unmarked at the front post, completely unmarked, free header. He's managed to sandwich himself in between Wolves' 2 centre-halves. But credit to Nathan Collins, and I do want to focus on Nathan Collins because last season, the absolute car crash of a performance against Wolves, and the jury was out a little bit for Nathan Collins last season, and we on the podcast had always said there is a player in there. He's either really, really good or he's really, really bad, and there's no in between. But this season, we are starting to see a level of consistency that I think actually puts him at the top of our performers this season. I think he's been our best player this season consistently. Even though we have conceded goals and scoring goals hasn't been a problem, Bryan Mbeumo, obviously in an attacking sense, has been our standout player. But Nathan Collins, in terms of where he's gone from last season to where he is now, in terms of being that commander in defence and probably making a better start than Ethan Pinnock, I think he's been absolutely fantastic this season. And I was delighted for him to get his goal, because I know that after that Wolves game last year, he would have been having some nightmares, because it just was an awful performance and he gave away about 3 goals. But for him to get on the score sheet so early on and for us to go 1-0 up, kind of poetic in a way, because, you know, he used to play for Wolves and he had that awful performance last year. But just, again, delighted to make such a fast start in this game. But I just want to point out the marking here. Just like, how is Nathan Collins allowed to ghost into the area? And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Wolves players there, and no one's picking up the centre half who's good in the air. I just think Gary O'Neill will be absolutely fuming with this, but nothing taken away from the pass from Damsgaard, who was excellent all day. We're going to dive into some of his stats and look at why he was the kind of difference maker for me in this game as well. But I just think it's poor defending from Wolves. And again, Brentford making a fast start. We score, I think it was 1 minute 17 seconds this week. So a little bit slow by our standards, but still 1-0 up in the first minute. And again, this is the second minute. I like the fact that against West Ham, you could even say to a certain extent, we were pressing again. As soon as we scored our goal, there was a spell of about 10 minutes where we were on top of the game completely, and I love the intent again. This is just after we've scored, and we've got Bryan, Damsgaard, Janelt, Sharda and KLP all bombing towards their penalty area, and it brings out to Bryan Mbeumo, and I think this is a chance where it comes over to KLP at the back stick. And for me, I feel like I'm saying it every week now, but for me, KLP's got to do better in these final third situations or in these final actions, because this is a free header at the back stick, and I highlighted it in the preview video. Semedo isn't great defensively. We'll be able to catch him out. And again, I don't want to put it all on Semedo. It's probably the structure here. Lemina's got to take one of Janelt or Sharda here so that Dawson can focus on kind of defending the front post, and so that Nelson Semedo doesn't have Kevin Sharda to worry about, and also KLP behind him, which he doesn't even see. But it's just poor defending from Wolves. But again, KLP in this position, when he's got a free header, he doesn't really head it down. He heads it straight at Johnston. If he heads it into the ground, then it's probably a goal. It doesn't matter where he puts it, because he's taking the pace of Bryan's cross. But again, just like the fact that we're so intense in these first few minutes, and we should be 2-0 up by this point, it's just credit to these fast starts. If we go into these games and we're 1-0 up, could be 2-0 up in the first 10 minutes, and it's such a head start. And it was so impressive today, because we all said after the West Ham game, we need to make these early goals count. And today, even though Wolves came back into the game twice, we made the goals count. There was never a point in this game where I felt like we weren't going to win. It was just really comfortable. Let's just move on to the next slide. This is Wolves' goal. Don't want to spend too long on this, because I think there's a few things that we can kind of talk about. First of all, I want to highlight Cunha here, because his movement's really good. Cunha was their danger man. I said it in the preview. And I think Norgard kind of gets caught ball watching here a little bit. He's kind of just gravitating towards the ball where Semedo has it, but Cunha just kind of stays put, pulls back, and it's a good finish. Like, you can't take anything away from the finish, and Cunha was a danger man all day. But you can see here, Norgard's getting drifted towards the ball, whereas Cunha's just screaming for it. He's just going to stay put, and that's the kind of striker that he is. In terms of his movement, and I said, do not let him get the ball anywhere near our penalty area, because he will punish us. And we let him have the ball in our penalty area, and he punished us. So, you know, I always expected us to concede. I didn't think we'd keep a clean sheet against Wolves, because I think they've got some really good attacking players in Strand Larsen and Cunha and Lemina when he's on his day. But I think Thomas Frank, he won't be overly disappointed with this goal. I know that there was a video going around and he said, you know, don't focus on the 3 goals that we scored. We managed to score 5. But as I said at the top of the video, it was not a 5-3 game. It really wasn't. It was anything but that. We could have had so many more goals, and they should have had 3. This was probably their goal that you can say that they probably deserved, because they weren't fully out of the game by this point. But in terms of the rest of them, well, in terms of the other 2 at least, they just didn't deserve them, I don't think. This is an aspect of Wolves games that I didn't really understand, because in our previous games, teams have had joy against us when they push us high up the pitch and they don't let us build out from the back in this slow way. Spurs did it relentlessly in that first half, and they absolutely killed us and should have been 3 or 4 up. But Wolves just gave us a lot of time to kind of do what we needed to do, bait the press, find the holes in the defence. Here, I think Nathan Collins picks up the ball from Mark Flecken. As you can see, the press has been initiated, but for me it's too late. He's almost already got the ball. So he's already got time to pick his pass. And I just want to highlight this huge gap in midfield. It comes to Norgard here, and all he needs is a pass to Damsgaard, which I think is what he does, and it eventually comes to nothing. But Craig Dawson is marking Damsgaard here. How are you letting Craig Dawson be pushed up on our number 10 here in this space when we've got Brian, who's behind his man there, and we've probably got KLP holding the width there. We've got Yano in the middle there for a bounce pass if he needs it. I just think this gap in the midfield, I put it in terms of Wolves' lineup. We'll just go back to it now because I've got it over here. In terms of Wolves' lineup, I kind of had all of these players here and they kind of interchange, but I really didn't expect Andre to just be all on his own in front of that defence. And there were so many opportunities for us to exploit this, and because they weren't pressing us high up the pitch with intensity, Damsgaard had a kind of free role with Dawson getting closer. How could Craig Dawson be the closest person to one of the most creative players on the pitch? And they should have done their homework, because Damsgaard has been one of our best players this season, and you're allowing Craig Dawson to sit on him and Vitaly Janot to be free in these areas, and Norgard to be there for the bounce pass, and Brian's there to come inside if he needs it, who's behind his man, and KLP's always going to have the width. I just think the game plan from Wolves was just really weird to see. Like, I thought Gary O'Neill would have prepared for this game a little bit better. And his post-match kind of told, in terms of, he said it was his worst day at the office, and it probably was, but just this gap in midfield, I was just watching like, wow, we need to exploit this, and we did exactly that. And forward to the next screenshot, but just look how much space we've got. It's just criminal from Wolves, really criminal. Norgard back in the team, a huge miss. We've said it before on the podcast, on this channel, having Norgard in the team in terms of his ability to just, he's got a calmness on the ball that I don't think the other midfielders have. He's never in a rush. He's always able to pick the right pass. And this was a situation where he's got 4 players kind of boxed around him, and instead of giving the bounce pass to Vitaly or doing the safe option and going back to Mark Flecken or switching the play, which I think the other midfielders would do in this situation if it's not a Jensen, but I think Vitaly certainly would. Damsgaard's always looking forward, but in this situation, he's just so calm on the ball to realise, actually, let's stretch my legs, let's get past these 3, and in one action, he's taken 3 players out of the game. And having him back in the team is just huge. People that were saying that Vitaly can do Norgard's job, and he thinks if there's going to be one of them in the team, it has to be Vitaly. It's just that game serves as evidence that is not the case. I wasn't surprised to see Vitaly back in the lineup. I wanted Fabio to start, but Vitaly had a fantastic game, so I don't want to slate him either. But in terms of if one of them has to go, for me, it's Vitaly, and then you bring him on to replace Norgard at 60 minutes. Like, similar we did in this game, I think he came off about 70. Ball comes over to Mikkel Damsgaard, who's in the middle of the pitch. And again, I highlighted this, Nelson Semedo is there to be caught in these situations where he overcommits or doesn't fully commit, or kind of doesn't really make his mind up about where he wants to press and how he wants to press. In this situation, he kind of runs out, gets caught, realises he's not going to get to the ball, and by that time you won't see it, but KLP is already sprinting forward, and with a little bit more quality in these situations from KLP, whether that's cutting in or whether that's better movement from the 3 in the box here, because we're going to talk about Kevin Schada's movement and why I don't think he had his best game, but it's only a matter of time until he gets a goal. But with some better movement or with the cut inside, you know, it's another chance, and it's another chance for us to score. But Nelson Semedo, look, he's already tracking back. I think we caught him out several times in this game, and definitely Thomas Frank would have noticed that. This is their goal. Again, don't want to spend too long on it. I've obviously skipped over the penalty incident as well, just because it was a pen. You can't put your hands around someone like that in the penalty area, and the only argument that I would make, if that was a pen last week, the one against Ethan Pinnock where he's having his shirt grabbed by Todibo against West Ham, is that a pen too? In this case, I think it was a stone wall. You can't have your hand around someone's neck in the penalty area and not expect to be punished for it. But a level of consistency is needed. Obviously, Brian steps up and dispatches it, and we're back 2-1 up. This is their goal. Mateus Cunha has the ball on the left. He drives at Sepp van den Berg and causes a little bit of chaos. It eventually breaks to Reynate Nouri. But I just want to take nothing away from this finish. Strand Larsen, even though I think Ethan Pinnock pocketed him effectively the whole game, this finish is just like top quality. Like, you can't really account for that. The ball from Reynate Nouri is great, but the anticipation from Strand Larsen to get across Ethan Pinnock so fast in this situation, and just to get that deftest of touches to knock it past Flecken, you just have to take your hat off to a great finish. That was a proper striker's finish. And even though Strand Larsen had a quiet game, and I think Ethan Pinnock did a great job of containing him throughout the game, I think, strikers are judged on their goals, and this will be, I think he'll enjoy that goal probably more than most goals he'll score this season, because he had no right to score there, and to get in front of your man so quickly and just to get that little touch he needed to just steer it past Flecken. It was a really good goal. Fast forward about a minute in between the times. There's 31 seconds we took to score our third goal. And this is the same technique here. You've got Ajer, KLP, Janelt, Sharda, Sepp, Damsgaard, all of them up in these areas. The ball comes up. We win the second balls. A bit of great play from Vitali here to kind of get in front of Mateus Cunha there and keep the attack alive. And then it's just terrible defending from Wolves. It really is. Like, again, it's almost like in their head, because we hadn't scored in the first minute, they kind of just took their eye off the ball from these kickoffs. But again, we treat them as set pieces, so it was just so poor. Like they would have known that this is what we're going to do from set pieces to get the edge. We're going to flood these areas, flood the final third, and see how we can get the ball from the second ball. So once they get it in these areas, surely their only thought is to just get rid of it, kick it out into touch, stop the play, get people back in their position set. But no, they just dick around with it at the edge of the box. Lamina ends up giving it away, and it's really tidy play from Jan out here just to play the perfectly weighted pass. And Christian Norgard in this position, I don't think he was ever going to miss, really. I think out of the midfielders that we've got, Christian Norgard in the box, which seems quite weird because he's a 6, but Christian Norgard in the box, I probably have more confidence in him scoring than any of the others. I don't know what you think about that, let me know in the comments. But when Christian Norgard gets into these areas, even in and around the box, he always gets a clean strike on the ball. His ball striking ability, I think, is probably the best out of the 3. Having said that, Vitali Janelt does score some absolute rockets, but he hasn't scored one in a while. But Christian Norgard in these areas, it's just a really tidy finish. I'm really happy with this goal, especially because it was another example of Brentford playing this neat and tidy football. We're so great at mixing it up in terms of these kickoffs. We get the ball long, we feed off the second balls, but then once we're in these tight little areas, we can put a nice bit of succinct, tidy play together and get into these situations where we're going to have a shot on goal. And that's what I love about Brentford this season. So this is the chance for Sharda at about 30 minutes, and probably, I don't want to say his easiest one because it's a header, and headers, if you look at their kind of expected goals value, they're always down and one-on-ones are always up. And Sharda had 2 1-on-1s in this game. One, there was an offside shout, and I think he was offside. We're going to look at that as well. But this one starts from Ethan Pinnock, and his position here, and he was doing this all day to Strand Larsen. He must have been so annoyed with Ethan Pinnock because he was so tight to him the whole time. But you see the difference there between the two teams. Our centre-half is on their striker, and their centre-half is on our 10. They were just completely playing into our hands and leaving spaces open all over the pitch. But Ethan Pinnock, the ball gets punted up to Strand Larsen here, and Ethan Pinnock's tight on him, ends up winning the ball back. And just before we go on to the next slide, I do just want to highlight Ethan Pinnock's touch map, or his average positions this game. You look at him here, Nathan Collins is obviously the sweeper, but Ethan Pinnock's touch map and his heat map here, he's so high up, and Strand Larsen must have had just such a torrid time against him because he was getting so tight to him at every occasion. And you just look how high he is up the pitch. We're going to come back to the heat maps because I do want to talk about KLP and Damsgaard occupying this position here, similar to what Fabio was doing last week against West Ham. But back to the slides. Ethan Pinnock wins the ball here. Plays it into Damsgaard, who then releases KLP down the left. And this is the kind of quality that I like to see from KLP in these final third areas, because he hangs it up to the best part of the goal that he could have hung the ball up to. And Kevin Sharda gets up the highest. But I think for me, I'm going to slow it down and move on to the next slide here because it is a good save from Johnston. But as you can see, the contact from Sharda isn't great. I think it comes off like the side of his face almost, and Johnston just ends up sticking out a leg and saving it. But he does everything right in this situation apart from the execution, because from here you're thinking he's going to get his head on that, he heads it down and it's a goal because he's taken the pace of the ball with him and just convert it. But I think his execution, he either goes too early with his neck or too late, and it just ends up kind of bobbling off his face, and he doesn't get the cleanest connection on it. Because if he does, in that situation, look at the leap as well. Bloody hell. I've said it before, he could be an NBA player. Look how high he is above their centre halves in this picture here. He gets so high and he does everything right, but just at the moment, it's just not going for him. And I mentioned at the podcast about the video that went kind of semi-viral after the game, Thomas Frank giving a chat to the players, and you see Sharda in the corner right at the end with his just looking a bit pissed off with themselves because he's had 3 gilt edge opportunities today to kind of go ahead and he could have had a hat-trick. He really could have had a hat-trick. But just in terms of the XG that Kevin Schade would have generated, I'll have a look at it now. Expected goals 4.25, which was the highest across Europe's top 5 leagues over the weekend. And even though in the first half, Wolves had a little bit more of the possession, they did absolutely nothing with it. Look at this. 5 big chances in the first half. 3 big chances in the second. They had 1. 0.46 XG in the second half. It was just... It was one of the most one-sided games I think I've seen at the G-Tech. And the fact that it was 5-3 is really, really annoying because it really takes some of the gloss off the scoreline. But we just absolutely dominated them, and they had more of the ball throughout the game, but they did absolutely nothing with it. Absolutely nothing with it. Again, this is just what I want to highlight. This was the set piece about 5 minutes before we scored our fourth, just before half-time. And Wolves had their warning. They had their warning. We were whipping in these set balls, and our delivery from these set plays was just excellent each and every time. Mikkel Damsgaard and Brian Mbumo did such a great job of putting it into the areas that we'd obviously worked on the training ground. But this is a warning here. Ethan Pinnock, the tallest man in the penalty area, has a free header at the back stick, and you're thinking, okay, well, we'll learn from that. Or the Wolves defenders must have said, well, we can't leave him free the next time. But just before we get there, I do want to highlight Kevin Schade's one-on-one. He kind of gets into these situations, and I'm not really confident he's going to score. In this one, he's got options here. He could go around the goalkeeper, and with his pace, you'd back him to do that. I don't know why he doesn't in this situation, but I think from the next slide, you'll see that he's just a yard or a touch offside. I think Dawson's playing him off, so it wouldn't have counted anyway. But I just want to fast forward to how we get our set piece. Some nice play between KLP and Damsgaard in this position. And I like how KLP is proving to be adept at linking up with either Damsgaard or Carvalho. They've built such a nice partnership between them. I need to find some passing networks on the next video. If someone knows a website that I can get passing network stats off, that would be brilliant, because I want to see this link-up play between KLP, because he's such a great player in terms of linking up with his midfield players and getting the better of his fullback. He can go either way. He can pass to Damsgaard like he does in this situation and play a nice 1-2, or he can take his man on. And he seems pretty good at doing that with either Carvalho or Damsgaard, or whoever's playing in that 10 position. He's got a really good relationship with. But ends up getting down to the byline and winning a corner, which is great. And this is what I want to highlight. I talked about it a couple of minutes ago with the previous corner on 30 minutes. Ethan Pinnock's there, again, unmarked in the box. It's just criminal from Wolves. It is so poor. They had their warning. He had a free header at the back stick. And again, just completely unmarked. Strand Larsen's trying to get out to him at this point, but it's got to be better. They were kind of doing semi-zonal and semi-man-to-man. But you're thinking, why are you leaving him open when you've had your warning 15 minutes earlier? And he should have done better with the header 15 minutes earlier. And this time he does so much better with this one. And it ends up in the back of the net. And it's obviously, credit to Keith Andrews, credit to Thomas Frank for working on these set pieces on the training ground. But if you're Gary O'Neill, you're absolutely fuming with the way that they've conceded some of the goals at the weekend. This is straight after half-time, coming into this. We're 4-2 up, we get the fourth goal, you're way more confident in the result now. Having that 2-goal cushion is massive. But again, we've shown our intent, we're trying to kill the game off early. And I just want to highlight KLP here, top left of your screen, and Kevin Schade in the middle. This ended up being nothing, but it was kind of the first sign that I had that Schade going into this half had kind of completely lost his confidence, because in this situation, Schade needs to be coming across the front post here, because I think the ball that KLP actually puts in is really good. Kind of goes in between Craig Dawson and the goalkeeper, kind of just on that 6-yard box, but it's further enough away from the goalkeeper that he doesn't come out for it, and it's not close enough for Dawson that he can intercept it. But you need to see a striker getting through the centre halves here. You have to see it. And there's an example that I'm going to bring up a bit later on in the video, talking about a Giltez chance again, and I think it came from KLP again. And Schade he's got to be bursting across that penalty box to kind of get the tap in that he would need in these situations. He just needs to kind of put the misses behind him. I know he's had 2 big opportunities in that first half to score or get on the score sheet, and he probably should have scored both. But he's got to put those behind him and carry on making these runs so that he eventually scores one and he gets the tap in, and then he's kind of in free flow. But this is where I want to highlight Damsgaard. Absolutely amazing game from him. His best game, I think I said, from Fulham a couple of seasons ago, that was his kind of standout game. And then, he had that big injury last season, came back into the team towards the back end of it. And in those last 10 games, there was a shout that he was our best player. And since then, he's just getting better and better and better. The levels are just going up. And I want to highlight some of his stats before I get on to this screenshot and this passage of play, which all starts from Damsgaard. But just look at these stats. I've highlighted KLP, Brian Mbumo and Mikkel Damsgaard in this in this stat pack from the Wolves game. He had our second most touches in the game. Nathan Collins had our first, which just shows that he's kind of the orchestrator so far this season. He's so comfortable on the ball, is Nathan Collins. But I just want to focus on his shot creating actions. 9 shot creating actions in the whole game. Obviously picked up 2 assists. I think he created 6 big chances in the whole game. But he was just our biggest threat the whole game. Everything went through Mikkel Damsgaard. If it wasn't a bounce pass, if it wasn't a pre-assist, if it wasn't some nice work, some nice intricate play in the midfield, which we're going to get onto, there was a touch that was quality that I've not seen since the days of Said Benrahma, dare I say it. But in terms of his 1v1 abilities, you just look at his stats, and I love to see that, you know, the players that should be performing and the players that are our main attacking threat, the stats really back it up. Look, 3 shot creating actions for KLP, 8 for Bryan Mbeumo, and 9 for Mikkel Damsgaard. And obviously they're the ones that get the assists and the goals and the progressive carries. They're so important to our team, and it's just great to see our front players actually firing and being fit, which is fantastic, because there was such a long period last season where KLP and Neil Maupay were stuck up front together. And now we've got Kevin Schade, and we've got Carvalho, and we've got Kinos Potter and Bryan Mbeumo and Mikkel Damsgaard, and we've got Igor Thiago to come back and Johan Wissa to come back. You know, Dan was getting quite a bit carried away on the podcast, and he put a message in our WhatsApp group after the game to say, you know, once we get these people back from injury in our Rico Henrys and our Johan Wissers and our Jensens, and we start to see a bit of depth on the bench and competition for places again, there is no reason why we couldn't potentially, and I don't want to say it too loud, I don't want to jinx it, but there isn't a reason why we couldn't push up the table a little bit higher to maybe where we were a couple of seasons ago. And people saying that we couldn't do it, the squad that we have now is not that far off what we had a couple of seasons ago. If anything, it's better. Yes, we've lost Ivan Toney. We've brought in players like Kevin Schade, who I think is going to be so important for us going forward. He's still so young. He's just been called up to the Germany squad. But it's not too different, and we've added some real quality. Once we get the players back from injury, there isn't any reason why we couldn't be looking to push higher up the league. But anyway, back to this chance. All comes from Mikkel Damsgaard. He actually loses the ball in this phase of play. But again, like Carvalho, I love to see his determination to get it back, which is exactly what he does. It comes out to Janelt, who plays a lovely cross-field pass to Bryan Mbeumo. And when the ball is bouncing, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but Bryan Mbeumo has become so good at getting the ball under control when you don't feel like the ball comes across and it's bouncing, and just like from playing Sunday League, from playing five-a-side, it's so difficult when you've got a man on you to kind of get the ball under control and keep it and get yourself a little bit of space that you can pick a pass. Brian does it at a rate, and I'm not, you know, the Sunday League compared to professional football is so different. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's closer than people think, but just like in terms of the immediate comparison that you can make between, you know, the football that everyone plays and the football that Premier League players play. He is so good at getting the ball under his spell in situations like this, where it seems more easy to give the ball away. The ball comes lofted over from Vitaly Janelt, and he just picks it out the air, gets in front of Ait-Nouri, and gives himself just a little bit of time to pick a pass. And he picks that pass. I think he plays it back to Sepp, who then plays it into Norgard, who then has a shot on goal. And then it comes back out to Vitaly. And I'm thinking again, Kingsley Spotter has this... He's always in these situations, always in a spot where he has a tap-in. And for some reason, he never gets picked out. I think Vitaly, in this situation, just had one thing on his mind from the very start, and that was to absolutely leather it. And I think he actually does get quite a clean connection on this, but ends up going straight at Johnston. But again, if he just plays it square to KLP there, he's got a tap-in. Whether he finishes or not, we don't know. We've had this conversation before. But it was just... some of the play today, we're just so adept at mixing it up this season, and we have been since we've been in the Premier League. But I feel like now we've not got Toney, we're really starting to see Brentford play on the floor a little bit more. But even still, we've got players like Damsgaard and Vitaly and Norgard in our midfield who can go intricate, they can go along the ground, but they can also go long. And we've got players like Brian, who is so good at getting the ball under control and keeping attacks alive. And that's what I wanted to say in the last phase of play. When the ball gets here, he's so good at keeping attacks alive. He's honestly, I've not seen anything like it at Brentford before, in terms of when these difficult balls come over, you know that he's not going to give it away. And if anything, he's going to keep the ball and keep the attack alive. And it's what he does in this situation. We end up having 2 shots on goal, and we probably should have scored in that situation. But again, the next screenshot I come to, Rayan Ait-Nouri is all over him. He keeps the ball alive. He plays it to Damsgaard, who, again, it's just another example of what I said in the previous clip. We can do it short. We can go long. Damsgaard picks it up, plays a great ball over to KLP. And this, I think, for me, is the one where Schade, he has to go across here. It comes out to Janelt. I think KLP gets the ball. Janelt is on the overlap. sprays it across the 6-yard box, but Sharda, you've got to be there, because it's the perfect ball. It's the only ball that Vitali could have played in that situation, and he's not going across the 6-yard box there, and he has to be. He's just on his heels a little bit, and maybe it's a confidence thing. I don't know, but that should be game over. That's a chance for me in the second half that should be 5-2, and then after that maybe it becomes a rout because the Wolves' heads go down. But for me, he's got to be getting across the 6-yard box here. Again, something I just want to highlight with Christian Norgard. His ability in these situations, and it's just the little things that I noticed about Norgard. Here, he's got Strand Larsen, Mateus Cunha, and I'm not sure which Wolves player that is, but he's got 3 Wolves players around him in this clip. And he waits until the exact right moment where he baits the press from all 3 of them to give it back to Sepp, who's down here at the bottom. But his ability on the ball to be so calm, and his decision making in these situations, I love it, because it takes 3 players out of the game, but he's not done anything. He's just waited until the right point to pass it. All 3 of them get baited into this press, and if we bring it back, Sepp plays it back to Collins. Norgard's already screaming for it here because he wants it back, because he knows that there's going to be a huge gap there. But if Collins plays this ball inside, which he doesn't, he actually lofts it over. But he's taken 3 players out of the game by doing pretty much nothing. If you take it back to this screenshot here, Norgard was screaming for it, and then we're on an attack, and then he can turn, and then he can play KLP, and then probably Damsgaard comes a bit deeper, as does Sharda. But Norgard is just so intelligent in these situations, and he's so important to our team. I have seen that Mikkel Damsgaard and Christian Norgard have been withdrawn from the Denmark squad, which is a little bit worrying. Christian Norgard obviously went off in about the 75th minute of this game, and Mikkel Damsgaard played the full 90, I think. But that's a little bit concerning, whether that's just precautionary. I know that Thomas Frank obviously is Danish, so maybe there's like a bit of back and forth between the Danish FA and Thomas Frank saying maybe we need them, or we want to keep them fit over this period, and we've not got 2 competitive games. I know it's Nations League, but it's not really games that are massively competitive, and that games I'd imagine players feel really up for going for, especially in these situations. So we'll see with what happens with that, but Damsgaard and Norgard today were our best players on the pitch, I think. So this is the chance that I think falls to Kevin Sharda, which was his second 1-on-1 of the game. And it actually comes from Vitali Adelt just bundling over Mateus Cunha, who was not happy with this at all. He was writhing around on the floor. Some theatrics from him following this challenge. But I think, having watched it back, I think it's a 50-50 shoulder barge for me. Cunha kind of goes over quite easily, and his reaction was quite funny to see. But the ball ends up being played out to Damsgaard. He just does this little kind of touch, jink in and out to get away from Ait Nouri and the covering defender as well. Just swivels, turns his back, plays the perfect pass through to Kevin Sharda, who's onside in this clip. And if this went in, this would have been one of the assists of the season, because his awareness, not only to get away from his 2 men, but also to play the perfect pass in for Kevin Sharda so that he doesn't have to break stride. But again, he gets into this situation, and I'm not confident that he's going to score, because he's already missed 2 in the game, and there's already been a couple of instances where I think he needs to get across his man. He's just desperately in need of a goal. I think we've had this conversation a couple of times with Sharda. He just really needs to score, and once he does, I think it will start flowing. But still an ever-present threat. He was a constant thorn in Wolves' side. With his pace, with his directness, with his ability in the air, I think he's going to be a really, really important player for us. He just needs to... He's so raw at the moment. He just needs to refine certain aspects of his game, and I think he will turn into a really, really important player, whether that's at striker or winger. But at the moment, it's just not really clicking for him. This was the funniest moment of the game, I think. I love the way it's William Saliba and Gabriel-esque, the way he celebrates these tackles that he makes, ends up knocking the linesman's flag out of his hand in this clip. But Aya, again, doing such a shift at left-back. I know he had a pretty weak game against West Ham. I didn't think he was on top of his game, but again, one of the standout performers this season for me, playing at left-back, but providing that width going forward, because I think Sepp, whilst he can get forward, and I like to see the fact that Thomas Frank bought him as a centre-half and he's already converted him into this right-back that can go forward and looks comfortable on the ball. I like that. Whether Liverpool fans saw that much to his game when he was there, in terms of going up and down the flanks on the right-hand side of a defence as opposed to being in the middle, I don't know. But the fact that Christopher Aya has managed to go over to the left and is kind of just seamlessly fit into this role of being a Rico Henry kind of replacement in a way, is really impressive. It's super impressive the way he gets up and down that flank, the way he supports KLP, his link up with KLP, but also just his passion in defending. He just takes pride in his defending. Very, very like the Arsenal centre halves do at the moment, but in this case, gets a little bit excited. I've actually managed to freeze frame the shot. as the lino's got his hand out, but the flag's already gone. But yeah, I love to see it from Chris Ayer having such a great season. It leads me into the next slide perfectly because, again, I want to highlight Brentford's ability in these situations. Yes, we're quite slow in the build-up play, but when we find the options, we just, at the moment, we're using them to such a great extent, whether that's Fabio coming in or Yarmo. It's just these neat little bounce passes that set us on our way. In this instance, Pinnock has the ball, and I think it comes to Yarmo, who plays it back to Pinnock. I think it's KLP in this instance comes short, bounces it back to Yarmo, and then Yarmo sends off Christopher Ayer. And I think this, again, should have been the 5-2 goal. But again, to kind of get from the corner of your penalty area to then play a couple of passes and get out so quickly, and Ayer already knows he's gone. And this was a theme. Literally in our first minute against Crystal Palace, we were doing this. Genuinely, we were doing this. I remember someone pointed it out on Twitter, and this was Brentford in our first minute, building out from areas deep into our half and getting out from them and having the outlet already going. He's off. He knows how this is clearly a directive from Frank. Yes, we're slow in the build-up, but once we get that opportunity to get out, we get out fast and we get out with flying fullbacks like Thomas Frank has always wanted to do and like we used to do in the Championship days, but we haven't seen as much in the Premier League. But in this situation, Ayer comes across, and for me, he's got to play Fabio Carvalho in there. He opts for Brian Mbeumo, who I think's offside by the time he plays it, but again, that should be the fifth. We're going to get onto the fifth now. I think it comes again from Yarmo, who I thought was really good when he came on. I know we had a conversation last week on the pod about whether he's come on as much as we'd have hoped for, having been so promising in his opening few games for Brentford. But can he bring the ball down in his chest? Yes. Can he pick the pass to Damsgaard? Yes. Can Damsgaard pick up the ball, get away from the midfielders and play in KLP? Of course he can, because he's just been on absolute fire this season. Can KLP get a shot away? And if he's not going to score, can it be further enough away from Sam Johnstone that he forces him into a save and not do a typical KLP finish sometimes where he just hits it straight at the goalkeeper? Yes. And then, of course, it's smart movement from Carvalho to be following the ball in and doing what Schade wasn't in the second half, and following balls when he should be following balls and making the runs when you should be, and anticipating the next phase of play and the next action that's going to happen. Carvalho, I think, is a really intelligent footballer. I waxed lyrical about him on the last video. I really want to see more of him. I was slightly disappointed to see him not start in this game, but you can't have any complaints when Brentford score 5. And I really don't. I'd like to see more of Carvalho. I'd like to see him come on earlier, but in the cameos that we've seen him in the games that he started in, I think he's been excellent. So we're adding options, and when these players come back and we get to more fitness, we're just getting more and more options, more and more depth, and we're building towards something. That is the last screenshot from me. This is Mikkel Damsgaard in Europe's top 5 leagues over the last year based on the minutes that he's played, and this is per 90 stats. 97th percentile in terms of assist, 94th percentile in terms of expected assist goals, 88th percentile in terms of non-penalty expected goals, shot creating actions he's high, progressive passes he's high, progressive carries he's high, successful take-ons he's high. Craig mentioned it on the podcast this week. Even defensively, he's so high. In terms of blocks, he's in the 99th percentile in Europe's top 5 leagues. This is like Mikkel Damsgaard. When we signed him, he had this arthritis issue and he just didn't get off the floor running. And we all knew that this wasn't one of the recruitment team signings and the way that they do it and the data that they look at. This was a Thomas Frank signing. We all had big hopes for Mikkel Damsgaard when he came in. It was a fairly big price tag. He scored that wonderful goal against England at the Euros, but it just, for one reason or another, whether that's injuries or whether it's form or confidence or anything, it just hasn't worked out for him at Brentford until now. And wow, I think we are really now seeing the player that we saw in these compilations when we signed him. We were like, oh my God, when he was playing for Sampdoria and he was just running past players at will, he was scoring from outside the box. That's the only thing he needs to add to his game, granted, is these goals, because he's only scored 1 so far and it's been in the cup. But once he starts to score, and even at the moment, he's still pulling the strings. Everything good that Brentford did yesterday involved Mikkel Damsgaard in some capacity, and to see him now, I tend to look at the way I want to use stats on this channel going forward is, if I spot something that I want to talk about, I'll use stats to back it up. And at the moment, I'm in a pretty good run of doing that because, Mikkel Damsgaard is just shining. And obviously, I'm not saying I'm a genius for pointing that out. I think everyone can see that Mikkel Damsgaard is shining. But in terms of his stats here, and bringing this audience something that they don't know, for him to be so high up in these metrics is just insane. For a player that didn't get written off, but we were expecting so much more from, I feel like we're finally starting to see it with Mikkel Damsgaard. And going forward, long may this continue. I hope he's not got too big of an injury. I don't know the reason why he's been pulled out of the Denmark squad. But going forward, he's going to be a big, big player for us. That is the end of this video. I'm going to be doing a Man United preview, kind of similar to what I did with the Wolves game. a bit closer to the time, but obviously going through some Man United clips, of which there are many this season, where I feel like they could be doing better. Just want to highlight Brian here, who scored 6 goals this season already, and United have only scored 5 in the whole season. So Brian and Bumo scored more goals than the whole United team combined. We scored an equal amount of goals against Wolves that United have scored all season. So I'll have a lot of fun with the preview, I think. In terms of where I think we can hurt United, there are many. The City performance for me was I watched the City game and I just thought, when we play United, the joy that we had against City, who are one of the better teams playing out from the back and one of the better teams in transition, we're going to have so much joy against United, because Liverpool absolutely tore them apart in that area of the pitch when they played them, when they were dispossessing Casemiro and Kobe Mainoo, and the amount of numbers they get forward and how fast they got forward. It's very similar to how we want to play. And yeah, that preview is going to be a lot of fun, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you haven't already, go across to the Eden Road podcast channel, watch the full podcast that we released yesterday. And of course, please drop a comment down below, like this video, share it around with your mates. This content is going to be coming every single week, so hit the subscribe button down below. And I will see you for a Man United preview very, very soon.